Welcome, everyone, to Vision Untethered Conversations with Inspirational Visionary Leaders. My name is Jill Simonds, founder of Savvy Strategic Partners, a dedicated leadership team of fractional executives that are executing vision, increasing business value, and helping founder owners realize freedom. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today, my friend Kevin Stoller, the creative visionary who founded K-12 and executive director of the Education Leaders Organization. Kevin is on a mission to help school leaders break isolation, build stronger leadership teams, and scale their impact across entire school communities. Thank you, Kevin, for being here.
Jill, thanks for having me. This will be fun.
Excited. It will be. Yeah, I love your story. I'm inspired by your story and having been a part of it. So, first, starting off, sharing what inspired your journey into business ownership and led you to this specific industry in education?
Oh, good question to start with. All right. So for me, it all comes back to Michael Jordan, which is weird, but I'm a kid who grew up in Chicago in the 80s and 90s, and he was like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's amazing how much
Big
like
deal.
family like was integrated with the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. And when I was in college, I had an opportunity to do a documentary, and my best friend and I did a documentary on the commercialization of Michael Jordan. And it was one of the first times that I realized like I can get into like a flow state. And I'm
Mm,
like, ooh, I like this. How do I do more of this? And it was really kind of like the first entrepreneurial type of project that I
hmm.
worked on. And honestly, I've been spending the rest of my career trying to get back to that type of mindset.
Amazing. So, what was it in that project that exposed you to that flow mindset or getting
Yeah,
in that
it
flow?
it was really the idea of creating something out of nothing. Like that to
Yeah.
me is like the driver. So, I didn't have the idea at the time, so I went and I got jobs, at different Fortune 500 companies, trying to figure out. Got my MBA and evening program, all with the idea of like how do I like start a business? I
Yeah.
didn't have an idea yet. And my running joke that I always say is I've written about 100 different business plans.
Hmm.
Selling school furniture was probably the worst one of them. And the reason I got into school furniture was I had a business partner that we teamed up, and we were like, well, what are we going to do? We knew we wanted to start a business, and we were going to stay within the industry we were working in, but we had a non-compete for a year. And
Mm,
his uncle had a school furniture business and said, well, why don't you just team up with us for that year, and then you can break off and do what you want to be doing with there. And that was how I got into this whole educational furniture world.
mm. Yeah, I think pretty typical of so many founders that kind of fall in. You fall into maybe a specific area or the path kind of guides you in a way that opens those doors and creates those possibilities maybe where you wouldn't have intentionally thought to look. So, and
Yeah,
of course, none of it's really what we learn in school, in college, because I'm
none of it.
similar to you. It was like go to school, get good grades, go to college, step into a job, and kind of learn the ins and outs and realize pretty quickly the corporate world isn't the best fit.
Yeah,
And yeah, I kind of scramble a little bit from there. Yeah, but it's nothing really they teach you in school. So.
no, not at all. It's actually like one of my passions right now. I'm like, how do we integrate some of these things, these entrepreneurial learnings into the educational experience?
Oh my gosh, yes. It is so needed. It is so needed. Our daughter took entrepreneurship for school as one of the electives, and I was super excited in the beginning, and it ended up being a complete, just a complete bomb of an experience for her. I think just approaching it like a textbook, as if there's like a textbook on being an
Mhm.
entrepreneur, and it just bored her to death. And I'm like, oh, I feel like we need a
You're
redo
like,
of
oh no,
this. And
yeah.
she's, like, she's like, Mom, if you taught the class, maybe, like, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry that yeah. But if we're trying to teach it by a textbook, it's not really going to
I
hit
know.
on the true experience and the need the requirements of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I love that. So how does your purpose align with the unique challenges that you've faced in scaling a business?
Ooh. So I think I need to start telling you where it was, where the mission started coming from.
Yeah.
So for the first several years of the company, we were selling stuff. I mean, it was literally we were in survival mode of just selling stuff. So the stuff happened to be chairs and desks and things that would end up in a school. But there was a moment where I was working with one of my principal friends. So he became a friend, but he was actually in the hometown where I lived and worked, and he knew that we sold school furniture. So he called me up one day and he's like, "Hey, I have a teacher that wants to try something else." And so we ordered 4 classrooms of this different type of furniture. My answer was like, "Yeah, we can get that. Like, we can get that type of furniture." So we ordered it. And about 3, 4 weeks later, I come back to the school and I just wanted to check in and see how it was going. And when I walked in the lobby of the school, there was just this electricity, like this buzz that was coming from one wing of the school. And I was trying, I'm like, what is going on? And as the principal came out, he just smirked at me and he just kind of like nodded, like, come on, follow me. And he pulls me in front of like into the hall, into the doorway of the classroom. And I watched this
Hmm.
teacher do something that I just had never seen before. Like
Hmm.
she had students in a U shape wrapped around her, like all paying attention, explaining what they were going to work on. And then all of a sudden she does a clap and they all break, like immediately just break into groups of 3 and 4. And you start just hearing this chatter going on and they're working
Hmm.
together. And the teacher's just kind of doing this like dance through the classroom, like between different groups. And at one point she'll just get everyone's attention and immediately you'll see, and these are fourth grade kids, like immediately she would be like, "Hey, listen to what they're doing." And you'd see a group of 3 or 4 fourth graders just talk in front of their class and present and share what they're working on.
Mm.
And then you'd see like a kid break away who needs to read or like focus on something individually. And by the end, she groups them all back together. And I looked at the principal. I'm like, oh, holy crap. Like, this is not
Mm.
what I know school to look like. Like, I know straight rows, kids' heads on desk, like
Hmm.
just watching that clock, waiting for the bell to ring.
Yep.
And I realized what we do actually matters. And it was that moment that
Mm.
really drove everything away from we're not selling stuff. We are creating better learning environments and we are going to be mission focused. And we've, really the last 10, 11 years has been 100% focused on mission.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah, to see it and impact and know that there's a mission to what it is you're producing and creating that goes beyond just a tangible, kind of logistic type product.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
But I also want to be clear about this too, especially like for your
Hmm.
audience here too.
Yeah.
Like I did not have the passion into this business when I started.
Hmm.
This drove me, and having kind of a passion, really defining our mission and our core values. One, it's obviously great for the employees because they want to be working, somewhere where they know their work matters and it has impact.
Right.
But
Hmm.
selfishly, like it's what I needed. Like I wouldn't, there's no way I would still be doing this if we were kind of like just selling products and we didn't have the mission behind it.
Yeah.
So as much as, like I always say this, as much as employees need to hear it too, the owners, uh, need
Hmm.
to have that same kind of mission and alignment in there. Like this isn't about trying to like fool like the rest of our team into like performing better. It's like it is very much of like it affects everything. Like it really
Hmm.
is like all of our decision making comes right back to our
Yeah,
mission and our core values.
exactly. Yeah. What's motivating about just, selling something? It's a passion that comes from knowing there's an impact from what it is you're creating and providing that drives people and teams to circle around. Yeah, that is a commonality and goal as opposed to
Yeah.
just getting the product out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And and up to the
beautiful.
point, it's very much like it's really easy as a business owner to just have your goals tied to like revenue and profit
Right.
and valuation or whatever it is that you care about. And
Hmm.
yeah, and I get it. Some people are like they look at business that way of like there is a clear scoreboard, of what's our, like what is our revenue, what is our profit, what's our valuation. Um, and like it kind of freed me up to not have to think that way. We
Yeah,
can we can now let's look at the impact. We know, yeah, we're still being good business people and making sure the numbers make sense, but that's a byproduct of our mission.
right. Exactly. Oh, I love it. That's a beautiful story. What is a pivotal failure or learning opportunity that you've encountered through the business journey, and how, in addressing that, did it shape the growth trajectory of the business?
Oh, I have so many. I
Yeah.
am one of those where I'm like, I
Mm.
am not successful because I am smart or I know what I'm doing. It's only because I've failed enough
Failed
times that
forward. Yeah.
that's
Yep.
whatever success we've had. It's just because we failed enough times to do that.
Exactly.
I've had so many like on the marketing side that were
Hmm.
failure, but I would say the biggest ones always typically come down to the people element in the business. And
Hmm.
the failures are the ones where I just honestly just didn't have the guts to make the right decision faster.
Hmm.
And, I had the tools to do it, but I still just didn't move as fast as I should have. Like I either knew it because there wasn't alignment in the core values, or they weren't
Hmm.
GW. We're an EOS company, so they didn't
Yeah.
GWC the role of the get it, want it capacity
Right.
to do that. But I tried to make it work anyway.
Hmm.
So to me, like most of our failures are coming back to it comes back to the accountability chart of we
Yeah.
just didn't have the right people in the right seats. And it doesn't mean they're
Hmm.
bad people and doesn't mean, it just
Right.
wasn't a right fit.
Yeah. Makes sense. What are some indicators that you see or saw in yourself or still do, of being too deeply involved in the day-to-day operations? And how did that limit the company's ability to scale and to innovate?
Um, so I'll tell you, so when we first started doing EOS, I had known about it for years. I've been part of EO Entrepreneurs Organization, and I had known a lot
Right.
of friends that have implemented EOS, and I'd read the book Traction and heard
Hmm.
a couple, like been to a couple workshops, but there was a moment where I was sitting in our conference room going through this, and again, kind of coming back to the accountability chart. But I wrote it out on the board. I wrote out visionary, integrator, sales, marketing, operations, finance.
Hmm.
And I I'm like, all right, I'm going to be honest and I'm going to go through and I'm going to go each box and see who is truly accountable in each one of these. And came back, me, 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 me.
Yep.
And I went out to our office and pulled them into the conference room. And at the time, we really only had 5 or 6 people.
Hmm.
Um, and that was part of my concern was we can't do EOS. We're not big enough yet. But I showed them. I'm like, guys, we're never going to grow if this is the case. And to my surprise, everyone on the team just picked up a dry erase marker and just started saying, well, I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll do that.
Hmm.
And it like that was the turning point. It was just
Hmm.
being able to recognize I don't have to be accountable for everything. And in fact,
Everything.
if I do that, I am limiting the company. I'm limiting the growth of the other people around me. I'm like
Right.
robbing them of opportunity. So that's one of the things that I like when I talk to people about. I'm like that the accountability is so important because
Hmm.
you gotta let it go. You have to.
Yeah. Who, not how.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some specific experiences that you've had where you felt trapped by your business and what strategies. I mean, there's a good example of it right there, but um, even along that journey with the right people to kind of guide leadership, what strategies have you implemented to create space for growth and scalability outside of yourself?
Yeah, it so one of the things that I'm always trying to do is just continue to learn and get better and on those
Mhm.
things. So, I mean, you brought up who, not how, and and a lot of the strategic coach types of things of 10x is
Right.
easier than 2x and gap in the gain, like
Yeah.
gap in the gain is so big in there.
Massive. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but but what makes me think is kind of the story when we were growing, but I still didn't have enough kind of people on the team to hold accountability. And like
Hmm.
we're selling furniture into schools, and we focus primarily on new school construction. So there was a moment where it was 3 a.m and I'm wide awake in bed. And my wife is turning to me and she's like, what are you thinking about? And at the time, like, we didn't have anyone like managing the installation of all of these jobs and their construction. So it was me. And I'm like,
Mm.
and I turned to her, I'm like, we have 3 full trucks of furniture coming to this job site tomorrow. I have a crew of like 8 to 10 college kids and they haven't paved the parking lot of the school yet, and we don't have access to the elevators, and it all goes up to the second floor. And I'm trying to figure out what is the route and where am I going to have these trucks park, um,
Oh
so that
God.
I'm not having 8 or 10 college kids just sitting around and
Right.
or they had a tendency to just roam around the school and you would lose them. And then I'd have to go walk all over the school to try to find what classroom they were hanging out in together to be like, come on, guys, the truck's here. Um,
Right.
but those were like those details, like those things
Hmm.
that as the owner of the company, like I just should not have been doing that. One, I wasn't
Right.
good at it, and it was super
Mhm.
frustrating, and it took a lot of my energy to do those things. Um, but those are the types of things that I feel like every business owner can relate to, those times where you just get in the
Yeah.
weeds of something and you just have to find people that are good at it
Hmm. And then the
and
structures then to stabilize that is, yeah,
exactly
something that can run and operate and at scale. Because at the
exactly
time when you've got that's just one, one project, let alone what is this going to look like as you add on more and
exactly
you grow, it's not scalable. Oh man.
yes
Yeah, it sounds like
I don't
a nightmare herding cats like to a whole nother level.
I have a lot of stories from that era of
I'm
working with
sure.
college kids in the summer.
I love it. Yeah, good learning opportunities and steps. Yeah. What leadership misstep has taught you the most about aligning vision with execution? And how do you apply, lessons learned from aligning those two well to move the business forward?
Yeah, so this is another one that I would say I'm always working on and trying to get better at, but I really do believe in the idea of servant leadership, of me asking the questions, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And
Mm,
and being there, to support other leaders. But I would say it's difficult to do, and I've definitely made a lot of mistakes in this realm of trying to get into more of the how to do it and not just trusting
yeah.
people to do it. And part of this is because we just have not documented our processes well. So I've put people in a role to do it, and then
Mm,
if there's not a process already done, I've kind of, I've gone kind of both sides of the extreme of this of like, well, you just figure it out. Like,
right.
kind of have them come up with their own process to
Hmm.
the other extreme of being like, no, this is the way we need to do it. And I really need you to do it this way. And I'm still trying to figure out the right balance to that of how do we get the consistency around our main, like our core processes, and then versus me being just you, it doesn't matter how you do it, you're
Yeah.
just accountable to get it done. And I feel like it's a tough one to pull off. I feel like we get
Yeah.
better at it. Like we're just always refining it and always trying to get better at it.
Hmm.
Um, but it's a tough one to try to
Yeah.
figure that out as a growing company.
It is. Well, and I think so much is shifting as and evolving in the demands of leadership as it's growing too. Like throughout that, what I heard you say too is like you're still figuring out, you're still, but at the core of that, you're focused on your style of leadership. And that style of leadership has had to evolve to meet that demand of what's needed for the team. And if you're, as a leader, if you're thinking of how am I serving others to be a steward of more leaders,
Yeah,
then that's half the equation, I think, as opposed to, feeling like you have to be the one that knows the answers and know the how.
yeah,
There's going to be an element, as long as, we're tying it back to the core values and the mission behind the company, how it gets done, needs to align with that in terms of the approach and the feel and the experience. But the nitpicky logistics, maybe not so much,
right.
right?
Yeah,
So I think you've figured out half the equation if your focus is not dictating how
right.
things get done, but inviting the team into that space to figure that out together. And I think the biggest point here is the fact that it's never complete. We've never really arrived as a team. And as we're growing, it's
Yeah,
a continual iteration. I love
yeah.
when you're faced with
I've
teams that are like,
exactly.
okay, the process is done. Like we wrote it, and it's like,
Yeah.
this is
No,
never done.
it's
This is
never done.
never
Yeah,
done.
I've heard the phrase and I use it all the time of like we're always in beta mode. Like
Oh, I love that.
it is never always like we are always looking at that and saying, okay, well that's the
Yes.
way the process is now. How do we get better at it? Like, or what did we
Mm,
learn? What do we need to
we're always in
adjust?
beta mode. I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we haven't ever fully figured it out. So, and that's where,
Yeah.
the biggest growth happens is knowing that we are continually learning and it's abundant in either way you look at it. Like if you look at it
Yeah.
as abundant in problems versus like abundant in opportunities to make it even better, it never ends.
Yeah.
We've
And
never
especially,
fully
yeah,
finished.
you never do. And especially like in the work that we do, like that's part of our approach is that it's not
Yeah.
a one size fits all. So
Hmm.
like every school is going to look different and have a distinct personality. So we've been working on a little bit of framework and a little bit to kind of tie back the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan and one of my favorite
Yeah.
episodes of Ted Lasso. Did you watch Ted Lasso?
Yeah. Remember we've talked about the
Yes,
Ted
we have
Lasso
talked about this.
craze.
All right. So there's a super weird episode in Ted Lasso that I feel like was written like specifically for like the target market of me. Like I think there may only be a handful of people that recognize what happened in this one episode. But
Okay.
it's when I think they're in Amsterdam and Ted Lasso thinks he's on mushrooms and he goes to that American bar.
Yes.
So he's in this American bar and they're replaying the crazy thing is they're replaying a game from the 1992 finals, um,
Right.
where Michael Jordan they're playing the Lakers. This is a game I actually was at. So I was
Oh,
at this game live. People are like, it was the one where he
this
goes in
episode they
for.
definitely made for you.
Yes, they made this for me. So then they go into it. It's the one where he goes in for like he looks like he's going to dunk with his right hand, but then he switches to his left hand and does a layup, and it's like one of his
Yes.
famous moves.
Yeah.
And this is on in the background, and then all of a sudden Ted Lasso comes up with this visualization of a new style of soccer or football that they're going to do that he comes and he references to what the Bulls did in this triangle offense, which was this structure,
Yeah.
it was like this loose structure that you have
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, it was very like in the weeds. Like they talk about the assistant coaches of the Bulls and things, so
Right.
like where that came out. So this is very much, I'm
Yeah.
like, I can't believe like they are doing this episode.
Uh,
But we've taken that
yeah.
type of approach to it is like, how do we now create, instead of like pure process, we create the framework where we know like, hey, these are the important things we need to do, but then still give our team that flexibility to be like,
Mm,
what's the right thing for the project, but still knowing we have to stay within a certain framework, which, yeah, which has evolved, so which we now call our radically
yeah.
student-centered approach,
Ah,
is around that
yeah.
framework. So super long story that most people could never relate to, but it
Yeah,
just all
no, I
started
get it.
clicking for me.
Totally. Well, and in that formation too, I mean, we're huge Ted Lasso fans too, or just in sports reference in general, because we're raising
Yeah,
competitive
that's right.
athletes.
That's right. And
And
you got the
so much, I
soccer
think,
players. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And there's so much that we learn in the dynamic of performing as an athlete with a team, regardless of, one of our daughters is a dancer, but she's part of a team, right? Like their competition and their performance individually comes together. So being a part of a team and that performance of how you show up, I've made tons of references to it as well that I can relate to, just in terms of like, even, whether it's with the kids or whether it's in business, of how important knowing the formation, knowing the kind of the structure and practicing it. Like we spend more of our time practicing than playing. And so when you finally get the opportunity to kind of show up in that, like how it gets executed, you've practiced so well,
Yeah.
that I think, yeah, there's so many such good reference
Yeah. Well,
from
you
that
got me
with,
into that point that you can learn so much from like sports, the entertainment world, like
yes,
of how much
totally.
like a performance, like how much practice goes in. And then it's really easy, for us to look in the business world and be like, yeah, we're just showing up for games. Like, are we
Yeah,
actually like doing the practice where
exactly.
the
So I think
real work and growth happens?
yeah, where that tie-in for me is like when we say none of it's actually done, when we're working on the business, we're working on procedurally, process-wise, where's your spot? Where are you going to play? What happens when this happens? That's all the practice, right? Because as we're doing it, if we're not actually coming up a level and a degree, to align, to talk about it, to
Yeah.
point out where are their gaps. We're not going through the playbook. And so much of the time spent on mastering performance is when we're actually talking about the plays and we're actually, how many sports teams do you see sitting out there with like they're all just in conversation and they are talking as opposed to running drills, because that's a huge part of it is like talking through aligning as a team. Do we mentally know how this is going to play out? Can we visualize it? Because if we're not taking that step back to actually kind of practice that, we are flying by the motions when it's really live and it's not
Yeah.
going well
No.
and we're not winning. So I love all that with the sports reference. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could. So we also do a podcast called the Better Learning Podcast, where we've
Yeah.
been doing it for 7 or 8 years, but this last year we added a new element that has made it a lot of fun, where
Okay.
we bring in our guests, that we're learning from, that are kind of most of the time they're in the education world or there's some
Mm-hmm.
type of thought leader. But instead of just
Yeah.
kind of doing like a interview style, we started wrapping it around asking them what's their favorite school related movie. And it's
Mm,
prompted some like just awesome, really fun ones in there.
yeah.
Um, but
That's fun.
it's been fun. Somebody actually answered, instead of movie, they answered Ted Lasso, and we had to. I mean, we're like, we have to at least do Ted Lasso, but we're trying to keep it just into the movie one because it's a lot of prep work, and I'm like, I don't want to have to watch a whole series if we didn't do it. But in our Ted Lasso episode, there's a huge component around practice, and
Okay.
there's that
Yep.
element. Yeah, there's one
Mm-hmm.
of the scenes in there where he talks about Allen Iverson's famous like practice press
Yes.
conference, and
Yep.
it is very much like I mean, that topic is
Yeah,
so big. And, whether it's businesses, same thing on the education side.
totally.
Um,
Yeah,
it's really hard if
it's
you're just going game to game without breaking it down and looking at the film and like really trying to coordinate and get that game plan and
yeah,
work with your teammates to make sure that
yeah.
we're
Every
showing up.
scenario, you've kind of played through and strategizing. Like a lot of it really is like, what is the strategy here? If you're going through the motions without
Yeah.
that first, it's pretty ad hoc. One other thing you said, or that I pulled out of what you were saying in that story, in terms of flexibility and entrusting, like an entrusting a team, I always remember, in those moments where I'm faced with kind of challenge or we're with a team that's, we're really solving some complex problems or faced with something that's we're in the mess, right? We're in the mess of it and or things aren't going quite as well as we planned, whatever that might be, right? There's a lot of scenarios this can happen, but it's staying true to the why and the
Mm.
what and being flexible with the how. So if the mission is centered around, student centered or this mission, if that's at the core, if anything affects how that's played out or, how that's reflected in delivery, then we're going to be stringent on that. Like why
Yeah.
we do this and what we're actually doing follows these guidelines, right? There's no flexibility in that. That's not going to change, but how we get there is where that flexibility comes in and where
I like
so
that.
much innovation can thrive with teams when we're all tuned into the why and the what. But how we get there is where so much creative expansion can happen in trusting in teams and bringing that together as a collaborative experience. So
That's a good
yeah,
way of
your
phrasing
story
that.
like pinpointed that exact, like seeing it in action, and seeing that happening in real life. That's cool.
Yeah.
What are some, for you, what are some common psychological barriers that either prevented you or that you see too in the midst of, community and business owners that prevent them from stepping back and letting go? And how can those obstacles be identified in order to improve upon them and to take action?
Yeah, I think the idea of fear probably doesn't get talked about enough in there is
Yeah.
I think there's a tendency for people who are not business owners or not entrepreneurs to think that a business owner or entrepreneur does not have fear in there. And that
Mm-hmm.
is not true at all. I mean, for myself, but also like, I know a lot, like hundreds of other entrepreneurs that I've had the opportunity to get to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I also am a big believer that you have to have mentors. So I'm always paired up with a mentor and I'm always mentoring someone else at the same time. And I learned just as much from both sides of that. But fear is a huge component that you have to recognize like where it is and really assess situations and know where the fear is coming in and then kind of overcome
Absolutely.
that with the right decision. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but as we grow, like, yeah, there was huge fear to start the company, but as
Mm-hmm.
you keep going along, the risk does not go away most of the time. Like I'm personally liable like to the bank for my home and pretty much like everything that I have is
Right.
on the line for the company. Um, but being able to mentally get over that and be like,
Mm-hmm.
but I trust what we built and I trust our
Right.
team to do that. But it is
Yeah.
a constant thing to make sure that that doesn't get in the way of the right decisions. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and for me, it's taken years to like really refine and like get in the mindset and like honestly, like have a whole routine around it, like every morning to help me approach each day with a good mindset because
Yeah.
it can, I mean, it ate at me for years. Like when we were, in our line of credit, that number would be, I mean, I would look at that every single day and be like, holy cow, like if this falls apart, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm in trouble. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, that's huge. It's either fear or love. There's not really like an in between in terms of where we make decisions or where our choices stem from or how we operate. So, I think in simplest forms, it's either a negative, coming out of like the what ifs and the fear, or having faith and making decisions based out of abundance and continually going forward.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
huge.
yeah.
Lastly, what would you say are practical steps you would suggest to entrepreneurs who are struggling to delegate while maintaining alignment with their vision?
Yeah. I think I actually going to lead into that is I think some type of routine that is that works
Mm-hmm.
for you.
Mm,
I mean, for mine, it's I get up at 5:30 and I go shoot baskets at a park. And I for a while, like I was kind of embarrassed by it. I looked kind of ridiculous, and especially when I went through an experiment where I tried shooting underhand for a while. But I shoot free throws. I shoot free throws, and I've been doing this for 6 years. And I actually track it, like how many I make and how many I miss.
oh,
But the reality
nice.
is, it is not at all about basketball. What it's
Right.
doing is it's setting my day up right. It's almost like a form of meditation, but I'm also listening to books or podcasts while I'm
Mm,
doing it.
mm-hmm.
And really, the last couple year and a half or so, I've been re-listening to a handful of books. Um,
Mm,
and it is so noticeable on the days that I do not do this, the difference that it is for me. Like my
mm.
mindset, my energy, everything about it really starts from kind of that morning routine, and
Yeah.
being able to set things up and be able to really think about things and process it. So I'm not in reactionary mode, that I could be in very much in like a proactive mode. So,
Yeah.
like obviously, like we can get into like tactical things that are like most important. But for me, like finding that routine, I call it the super activity. Like to me,
Mm,
it's health related. Like it's a good mindset
yeah.
thing. I'm also learning. Like there's so
Yeah.
many good
It's so
things that happen
holistic.
from like a simple like 30-minute routine that I do every
Mm-hmm.
morning.
Yeah. Love it. Just structure in small forms can make a huge difference. And I think that scares a lot of entrepreneurs away, but structure is the path to freedom,
Yeah,
right?
it
Having
is.
something that, you build in and you get to design that. You get to design how that looks. And until we do that, you're not really experiencing that true freedom of things fitting into, this path and the environment you want it to look.
Yeah.
So, so good. Kevin, thank you so much for being our
Anytime.
guest and
Thanks
sharing
for
your
doing
story
this.
and your wisdom. It's, yeah, it's gold. So thank you
Yeah.
so much.
No, I love that you do this. Yeah, I love seeing others that you've talked to, and yeah,
Hmm.
it's great. So keep it
I
up.
always learn something. Thank you. If people want to find out more either about K-12 or Educational Leaders Organization, or just to get in touch with you in general, where should they find you?
Probably LinkedIn's probably the best one. It's probably the
Yeah,
social media where I actually contribute.
spend some time. Yeah,
So yeah, my LinkedIn page is where I try to connect with people, and
great.
I've just really liked that LinkedIn community. I feel like
Isn't
it's
it?
social media
Yeah,
that's actually like really good.
exactly. I'm a huge fan too. Well, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for listening. We will see you next time.